David, we're live.
Good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of Hertfordshire County Council's Cabinet. I'm joined this afternoon by all my Cabinet colleagues, Teresa Heritage, Deputy Leader and the Executive Member for Children, Young People and Families, Derek Ashley, the Executive Member for Growth, Infrastructure, Planning and the Economy, Phil Bibby, the Executive Member for Highways and Environment, Terry Duris, Education, Libraries and Localism, Terry Hone, Community Safety and Waste Management, Tim Hutchins, the Executive Member for Public Health and Prevention, Richard Roberts, the Executive Member for Adult Care and Health, and Ralph Sangster, the Executive Member for Resources and Performance. Before I start, I want to make the following announcement. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, this meeting is being held electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public are able to view the proceeding live streamed on YouTube and also on demand by following the link that's available on the Council's website. Members of Cabinet are asked to keep their microphones and cameras switched off until called to speak and to switch their microphones and cameras off once they've finished speaking. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the chat function. I'll ask members to vote for, against or abstain for each item at the end of the debate on that item and ask that members indicate their vote using the chat function. I will declare the result after each vote. Officers are in attendance but will keep their cameras and microphones switched off unless called to speak. So on our agenda this afternoon, we have the minutes, and I wish to confirm the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on the 15th of June 2020 as an accurate record. Can I ask you to indicate on chat to that effect, please, colleagues? That's great. Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Those are confirmed as an accurate record. The second item on the agenda are questions from members of the Council to executive members, and we have none. Agenda item number 3 is public petitions. There are none. But I do just want to make the statement that members are reminded that all equalities implications and equalities impact assessments undertaken in relation to any matter on this agenda must be rigorously considered prior to any decision being reached on that matter. May I also remind colleagues that any pecuniary interest or declarable interest must be declared. So the first substantive item on our agenda this afternoon is Hertfordshire County Council's response to COVID-19. The Special Cabinet Panel considered a report on this item of business at its meeting on the 2nd of July. The report, which is published on the Council's website, provides a really detailed account of the national position, the government's strategies, and Hertfordshire's strategic response. Now, inevitably, this continues to be a dynamic and fast-moving issue, and so I think it would be very helpful for those watching this broadcast to have an update on case statistics and the local outbreak control plan measures that we've introduced, an update on what we have termed Operation Shield and Operation Sustain, an update on the work to ensure that Hertfordshire's high streets are as safe as they can be as shops, cafes and restaurants and pubs reopen, and also the latest proposals in terms of local authority funding, which have happened and been announced since the report was published and since the Special Cabinet Panel on the 2nd of July. So, Tim, can I turn to you to provide us with an update on the case statistics and the local outbreak control plan measures?
Yes, certainly, David. Since our last meeting, as you said, we've introduced and written our outbreak plan, which had to be submitted by the end of June. And I'm pleased to say it was submitted on time. And it actually received some very good reports back from regional and national colleagues. The plan itself is designed in the first instance to prevent outbreaks, to prevent problems. but obviously then to respond to any that do arise. In putting our plan together, we're looking at a number of high-risk settings, care homes, schools, houses of multiple occupation, and of course workplaces. I'd like to pay tribute at that point, I think, not just to my own staff, but also to our colleagues within the district and borough councils. It's been truly, I think, a team effort, and we put this together very well, I think. In addition to that, we're also looking at vulnerable people and communities. Should an outbreak occur, do we have the facilities to support them, etc., etc.? And I'm pleased to say we do. Contained within it is a number of work on highways, and I think Phil is going to deal with that, so I'll just gloss over that one for the time being. The plan itself is supported by government funding. We received just over £4.5 million to carry this out, and it's enabled us to look at a whole range of things, not just those that I've mentioned, but also testing and tracing, and how we're going to deal with communications. And over the next couple of weeks, members of the public will see all sorts of advertising coming out, stressing the need for us all to play our part in keeping the infection rates down. Also contained within our plan are details of governance and how we're going to work that. In terms of the plan and in terms of outbreaks, I have to say across the county, the numbers that we're looking at are fairly low. And I'm pleased to say they're also spread out, suggesting that we don't have any particular areas of focus. Except that we had one problem last week in a care home in St Albans, but that was dealt with very quickly. It was isolated and we're on top of it. There were a number of newspaper reports as a consequence of that, which I have to say I'm very disappointed with. The newspaper figures for St Albans are not ones that we recognise. In fact, they were suggesting that the problems in St Albans put us in the top 10 of the worst in the country. The reality is we're not even in the top 100. Figures in St Albans were a little elevated for a few days last week, with the majority of infections contained in one care home, as I've said. We've been monitoring the situation on a daily basis and have put in actions which have resulted in figures coming down again. There is no evidence to suggest a risk of a wider outbreak in St Albans, or for that matter anywhere else in the county. However, we recognise the need to remain vigilant. Of course, and in remaining vigilant, we have kept our colleagues in St Albans and City District Council fully appraised of it, and I'm pleased to receive their thanks for having done so. But at the end of the day, I would like to repeat the reminder: COVID-19 is still around, and people need to continue to take precautions. We've done very well in the county. We've kept down well below certain parts of the country. And our intention is that we should stay that way. So I think we have a comprehensive plan that's been put together with a great deal of thought, a great deal of cooperation with our district colleagues, our colleagues in other departments in the county, and indeed other stakeholders, the NHS, etc. in the county. So yes, we have a plan. It's been tested. It will continue to be tested, but I'm confident that we'll deal with the challenges as and when they arise.
Tim, thank you for that. And yes, I think it's just worth underscoring that the nature of this plan that we've put in place now means that if events occurred such as those that residents will have seen in Leicester, and then recently in the last 48 hours or so, the events that have happened on a farm in Herefordshire, that identification of high-risk settings is exactly the sort of work that has been done to put this plan together. Personally now, I chair the engagement board of the 11 council leaders across Hertfordshire, as well as the Police and Crime Commissioner, and we've been meeting weekly. And it's been really encouraging to see the quality of the plan and the actions that are now being taken on a daily basis as information is shared with us. So, Tim, thank you for that. Can I turn to Richard Roberts, to update us on Operation Shield and Operation Sustain?
Thank you, David. As you'll know, that during the period of the pandemic, government came to us with a list which in the end topped at 42,684 people who were shielded. And from a standing start, we took it upon ourselves to work with government across health, the voluntary sector and our district councils to ensure that those people needed the support that they needed. And that resulted in us delivering food parcels and medicines, toiletries, even dog food, for example, if they couldn't get out, and offering other services, so that we, with our volunteers, were able to support up to 6,000 people at any one time. And the government was also sending food parcels to another 10,000 in the county. But as of the end of July, we will be winding this operation down. And so we will pause it to some large extent, but making sure that all of those who have been shielded or who need some further support in the future, they will have a mechanism, a point of contact with us to be supported how they are needed to. But we've made sure that by personal contact, that people have access to supermarket slots, for example, for home deliveries, that local volunteer networks are able to contact local people, and Hills, our Meals on Wheels service, has been ramped up to be able to take more meals and to look after more people in the community. And so Shield will effectively become downgraded to sustain, which will itself probably be finished and concluded by the end of the year. And I'd just like to thank the number of volunteers. More than 10,800 came forward, of whom nearly 6,000 have been deployed to help right across our communities. As of last week, there's only about 237 individuals or families being supported directly. And of course, as the weeks go by towards the end of the month, towards the end of the month, then there will be our work at Mundles with our volunteers and with the help of REACT, our military veterans, for example, will be wound down completely. There is contingency planning linking to what Tim was saying in case we get a local flare-up. And so that if we need certain people are shielded again within specific communities, we're ready to help them. And just in case those out there are listening and we're worried about where they should contact, go to Hearts Help, and the telephone number is 0300 123 4044. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. So I think that's more than sufficient. Thank you.
Richard, thank you for that. So Phil, can I invite you just to update us on the work that's been going on to ensure that the high streets are as safe as they can be as shops, cafes, restaurants, pubs, etc. reopen?
Certainly, David. Yes, we are very anxious to get the economy moving. So is the DFT. They've decided to actually give powers to districts to make it more easy for businesses to apply. So districts will have the power to license at a very minimal fee of £100. This is required a very quick change of legislation, which is presently going through the House of Lords. And I believe the third reading is due on the 20th of July, and presumably everything will go well. We will then look for royal assent shortly afterwards. Highways will still be a consultee, being responsible for safety on the highway, but we've actually issued guidelines to districts. And in the meantime, before the royal assent is received, we have said to districts, we would like you to expedite applications from your businesses, and providing they are within the guidelines that we laid out and agreed with them, there should be no problems with bureaucracy, etc. We just want to make this as quick and easy as possible. One other thing I'd like to mention is that we are now to bid for tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund for about £6 million. This is really designed to actually get road space taken away from the motorists and given back to the cyclists. Bids have got to be in by the end of August, and we've been consulting with local members and districts, and we are presently sort of looking at these lists and prioritising to find out which are achievable. And once we've done that, we will actually get our bid in by the end of August to be spent by the end of March 2021, subject to us, of course, being successful in our bids. So that is another nice chunk of funding, which we are deciding how we can spend most effectively. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Phil. And then finally in this section, Ralph, can you update us on the latest proposals that were announced by the Secretary of State, I think on the 3rd of July, in terms of local authority funding and how it might affect us?
Yes, certainly, David. I'd like to provide an update to the response from central government to the latest Delta returns. You'll recall that the most recent return measured the council's COVID costs at around £73 million and the receipts at around £48 million, leaving an unfunded gap of £25 million. The government's response has been to announce a further cost funding package of £500 million with a new distribution formula, which details how that's to be distributed, details of which are yet to be announced. It was also signalled that this will not be the final figure and that future returns would be assessed as the response to COVID develops over the coming months. Alongside this, additional cost funding for government has also been announced, separate arrangements to deal with lost income. Councils' lost trading income will now be supported through a formula which reimburses 75% of lost income above the initial 5%, which is borne by the council. The potential for the lost tax base income is to be addressed in the spending review scheduled for this autumn. And I would like to reassure residents that the council is confident that it remains in a strong position to support service delivery, particularly throughout all its care settings in the county.
Ralph, thanks. Once again, I want to recognise the outstanding contributions of our staff, our partners, the volunteers that we've worked with across the county, and importantly, the part being played by our residents to defeat the virus, to take heed of social distancing, to wash hands, to isolate if necessary, to get tested if appropriate. So I really do appreciate the contributions of all of those people who are really making a difference for us in Hertfordshire. So now the panel's recommendation to this meeting of Cabinet was set out in a proposal, and I'm going to read the proposal so everyone can appreciate what colleagues are being asked to do, namely that Cabinet notes the Council's planning and response update to COVID-19, including the planned approach to dealing with the financial implications, and that Cabinet formally adopts the Hertfordshire Local Outbreak Plan attached at Appendix C to the report. So can I ask colleagues to vote using chat as described at the outset? That's great. That's unanimous. So thank you for that, colleagues. So let's move on to agenda item number 5, the Invest to Transform bid for assistive technology in adult care. And Richard, you're going to introduce this for us.
Thanks very much, David. First of all, I'd just like to apologise for having my care badge upside down in the previous item. This was pointed out to me, and for those of you watching in black and white, it is now back in the right position. Thank you. I'm very proud of my care badge, as we all should be. Thank you. Right, this Invest to Transform bid is to support a second wave of research into our assistive technology to particularly allow our older people to stay independent, healthy, and supported in their own homes. We feel that using relatively simple pieces of equipment, which are placed in people's homes, these are switches, recording movement, checking whether a med box is open, for example, half a dozen relatively simple pieces of kit where the information, the data that is generated from those is collected. And the reason we want this additional money is to scale up the project to some 200 residents in need of this equipment, but also to develop with a partner the analytics that make sure that both the carers, family carers, and our own staff and or care providers have really informative results that enable them to respond effectively to the needs of the people who have this kit. So if somebody, for example, if somebody had dementia, it would enable them to live at home longer before they would need to go into, for example, a care home. It might prevent dehydration, certainly prevent urinary tract infections getting out of control, prevent hospital visits. And the costs would be, savings would be significant. We think within 3 years, there would be savings of £3 to £4 million per year. The savings would be right across health and social care. But I think most importantly, it is the confidence that this gives to both the individual and to the family that somebody's keeping an eye on a loved one, mum, dad, grandparent, and that is so important. And if our whole ethos is that people should be allowed to live the healthiest life they can as independently as long as possible outside of a care setting. And this is one of the ways that we think will really make a difference. We have between 3,500 and 7,000 residents who may benefit from this. So we're scaling up to 200, but as part of the project over the next couple of years, we'll be looking to move into that larger number of supported individuals. So I wholeheartedly support this, and I'm hoping my finance colleagues do likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. And so on that note, can I ask Ralph, as the Executive Member for Resources, just to comment on this drawdown from the Investor Transform Fund?
Yes, thank you, David. Yeah, I'm fully in support of this this proposal. It's an area where we are leading the pack in terms of the production of a workable system that is IT based. It may well in the future provide us with an opportunity to use that cutting edge technology to raise further funds within the organisation and outside the organisation. So it's a very, very, very important initiative. And I'd also like to say that that initiative is being supported by the Investor Transform Fund, a fund which we have consistently maintained against, I might add, some opposition from other groups, to provide the very funding that this particular project needs. Otherwise, that funding would have had to have come from the delivery of frontline services, because there would have been no other a way of providing those funds to support it. So I think the Investor Transform Fund is an extremely important reserve that we hold, and its importance is being shown up by this proposal, and I'm fully supportive of the spending of that funding into this project.
Thank you, Ralph. So, Tim, you'd like to comment?
I hope that's working now.
It is now, yes.
I'd just like to very much support this motion. You know, it's been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt that the longer older folk can stay in their own homes to live independently in an environment which they understand and are comfortable in, it does a great deal for their health and well-being. So I have no hesitation whatsoever in supporting this motion. I think it's a great idea.
Thanks, Tim. If there are no other comments, I'd just like to add my support as well. You know, the key here is the use and understanding of algorithms that can analyze the data that the technology is able to provide. And as a consequence, in a very unobtrusive way, it enables people to live safely in their own homes, or as Richard said, away from a care setting for as long as possible. And I really do feel that we have a technological advantage here that we should look to capitalise on. So this was considered by the Special Cabinet Panel, and its recommendation to Cabinet was that Cabinet approves the Investor Transform funding of £1.56 million to formally evaluate the assistive technology pilot and mainstream the use of this technology. Can I ask colleagues to vote using the chat system, please? That's excellent, thank you. So that has received unanimous support from colleagues. Thank you. So let's move on to agenda item number 6, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, which is known as RIPA, the annual report for the period the 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March 2020. And Terry Hone, you're going to introduce this for us.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This is an annual report which we bring before Cabinet. It needs the approval of Cabinet to see they've recognised what we've been doing in the past 12 months, particularly around, as it says, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, where it's delegated to us, our trading standards people, to investigate issues which may be of detriment to the public around particularly trading standards. And some examples of this would be, for example, the sale of liquor to underage, the sale of knives to underage, even the sale of lottery tickets to the underage, amongst many other things that we would investigate. There are powers which are delegated to us. However, those powers are strictly regulated. And in order for us to go down some of the routes which we would go down, if we chose to investigate something, we do need lots of permissions from a number of people. In fact, two lots of permissions in order to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken in the appropriate way to not only defend the public, but also those people who one could say we are spying on, and we're not spying on or far from it, but who we're investigating. So this report shows us in the year what we've been up to, and shows that we have used the one of the powers twice, and that is clearly in I think item number 5, where we say the use of RIPA for covert surveillance. And you'll see the direct surveillance, the number of direct surveillance authorisations granted during the period was 2. Therefore, it does demonstrate that we are not using these powers just ad hoc. We are very careful how we use these powers, when we use them, and 2 in the year is about the average for the number of years certainly I've been involved in it. There are other types of allowances we can do, which is the covert human intelligence sources, which is sometimes known as CHIS. But that, again, we have not used those powers. It's not been necessary to use those powers. And there's been no breaches in procedures, the RIPA procedures, by our trading standards team throughout the year. In addition to this report, which details what we've been doing the past 12 months and how well we've done with it and how we stay within the rules and regulations, we also update our rules, our procedures every year to make sure they're current. And that reflects any changes that may have happened to legislation, and also changes in the public, the way the public operate. Example of that, these 3 procedures you have in front of you, which I won't go through in detail because they are quite technical and also self-explanatory. One of them around social media surveillance includes now TikTok, because that's the latest one to come on the scene. So, which is a Chinese social something we would use, that many people would use, and therefore nowadays we have to not only look at things like YouTube and Facebook and these, but also TikTok as well. That's been the only change to our procedures, is around that social media TikTok. Other than that, Chairman, the report is there and the procedures are there, and I ask for agreed to the recommendations made.
Terry, thank you for that. I can't see anybody wishing to come in on this, so it just is for me to reiterate that this was considered at the Special Cabinet panel on the 2nd of July, and the panel's recommendation to Cabinet was as follows: that Cabinet approves the policies on A, directed surveillance and covert human intelligence sources attached at Appendix A to the report; B, acquisition and disclosure of communications data from communication service providers attached at Appendix B to the report; and C, the use of social media in investigations attached at Appendix C to the report. So if colleagues are content with that proposal, can I ask you to vote on 6.1 on the order paper? Excellent, thank you. So that's agreed unanimously. Thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item number 7, the Finance Budget Monitor, the outturn report for the financial year ending the 31st of March 2020. And can I invite Ralph Sangster to introduce this, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I think whilst we're in the midst of the pandemic, as we are, it's very easy to forget that at the beginning of last year, the finances of the council were under considerable stress. The first quarter monitor in last year's budget was showing that there was an anticipated overspend in our budget of nearly £7 million. Well, had that taken place, or had that been continued through the year, that would have swamped our reserves of our contingency reserve of £6 million. So last year, at the beginning of the year, there was a concerted effort by executive members and the accounts team and the various officers responsible for spending the council's funds to identify those pressures, most of which were surrounding the Children's Services division, and bring them back under control, to find savings in other areas where we could mitigate some of those costs, because it was extremely important that we, by the end of the year, we're able to bring our budget back inside the overall envelope. That's important because over the last few years, we've been able to do so. And where we've done so, we have then been able to put some funds into our transformation reserves, which have been set aside particularly in light of the funding gaps which have been developing over the last few years, and for us to have some flexible reserves that would be able to be used in bridging future gaps. Now, during last year, we were able to bring back the overspend to a manageable number. It ended up around £2 million, which provided us with an opportunity to put a further £4 million into that transition reserve, making a total of some £20 million, which is available to us to flex our budget going forward and to respond to any shortfalls, for instance, that may occur during this year as a consequence of some of the extra spending that we're being asked to absorb. So that was the outcome for last year. It was an extremely focused effort on behalf of the officers, who I'd like to thank for their hard work in firstly controlling the spending costs and in finding additional savings that we could bring forward, as I've said, to mitigate. The report also provides for deferment of some revenue spending, which is mostly grant and specific spending, which is being asked to be moved into next year as opposed to this year. And there's a deferment of something around £40 to £45 million worth of capital work, which has been delayed or has been postponed potentially as a consequence of our arrangements in terms of responding to the COVID situation. So the report would have potentially been a very difficult one to address, but because of that hard work last year, it's actually turned out to be a success for the whole council in responding to that situation. And I'm more than happy to recommend the proposals under 7.1 on the cabinet paper.
Ralph, thank you for that. Yes, and let me add my appreciation to both senior officers on the resources side, but then also the service directors for the individual areas of the council for the very strong financial management that's been exercised over the last 12 months in order to bring about this outturn in quite challenging circumstances. So particular credit to them. If there aren't colleagues who want to add anything at this stage, it just remains for me to say that this was considered at the special cabinet panel that we held on the 2nd of July, and the panel's recommendations to cabinet were as follows, namely that cabinet note the overall financial performance for the county council during 2019-20 and agree, 1, the proposed carry forward amounts relating to ring fence budgets as set out in section 1.2.3. 2, the proposed carry forward amount relating to general budgets as set out in section 1.2.3. And thirdly, the proposed transfers to reserves to be made from the revenue contingency budget not required during 2019-20 as set out in section 1.2.5. So can I invite colleagues to vote on that proposal, please? Colleagues, thank you. That's unanimous. So that proposal is carried, and that concludes our meeting for this afternoon. Thank you for your participation and attendance.
Thank you, Chairman.